Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jay, and I'm a historian who's also terminally online and a bit of a news junkie. And so, what I like to do every week is go through what I think some of the most important stories are from the week and give you my thoughts on them. And so, this is going to be for the week that is ended on Sunday, August 24th, 2025. So, let's begin with Ukraine war updates, as it seems to have become a major story over the past couple of weeks. There was that meeting at the White House with Zelensky from Ukraine, the French, Italian, German, and British prime ministers, as well as the head of the EU, head of NATO. Oh, and Finland's uh, premier showed up as well. So no deal came out of that. Trump basically is doing nothing. But fortunately, the EU leadership has stepped up and is being able to aid Zelensky. Another thing, and I think this is actually a bigger story than what is being made out in the press at this time, and in some ways being overlooked by it a bit, is there's been more attacks by Ukraine on Russia's oil infrastructure. An oil refinery was hit on Thursday, but more importantly, the Duzbra oil pipeline, which feeds oil into Slovakia and Hungary on Friday, that was hit and caused all sorts of problems, as in Hungary and Slovakia is no longer getting direct oil from Russia. They, at least for the next week or two, they will have to truck it in or get it sent by oil tankers, ships. But this is actually a good thing, because this could force, especially Viktor Orban over in Hungary, to beg for ceasefire from Putin. And another thing that's going on, and this is what regarding the oil attacks, and I think this is more crucial, is I've been seeing reports that Russian rural population is starting to see oil shortages in those rural oblasts, and there's starting to be reports of lines at gas stations in rural Russia, where farmers and those folks are just trying to top off their tanks, get as much fuel as they can before it runs out. And this is actually not something that is new to Russia, with them not supplying to rural areas. This goes back to the Russian Empire. The Soviet Union, the Russian Empire, now Putin, they're trying to ensure that the major cities, particularly St. Petersburg and Moscow, they keep them well supplied with food and fuel and anything else they need, as well as the military. And because those St. Petersburg and Moscow are the major population centers. That's where most of the largest concentration of folks are in Russia. The rural area, it's like, say, the United States. Most of the population is concentrated in a few cities and the suburbs surrounding them, and rural population is less than 20%. And also, you want to keep the military well supplied, especially since they're fighting a war. And at this time, by doing that, the Kremlin's just trying to stay in power by keeping the major cities, and the military fed and fueled up, because should there be shortages occur in the cities, then the population is going to start they're going to start protesting. And if that happens, then the Kremlin is going to be forced to augment their internal security forces with the army, which means they would have to beg for a ceasefire with Ukraine, so they can pull all their forces back to the cities. And that can actually be a good thing. So my thoughts on that is, Ukraine just needs to keep up the attacks on the oil infrastructure. The more refineries and pipelines they can take out of service, the quicker it's going to force the general population to be like, hey, we're running into shortages. Putin, you're doing a bad job. We're going to protest. And then that's going to force security forces to come out, and security forces get overrun, which is going to force Putin to start pulling out military units from the front in order to put down the protests. So that's something just to keep an eye out on. And another thing, there is a U.S.-owned factory in Ukraine that got hit by a Russian drone this week. As of filming, Trump hasn't done anything about it, and so we'll see what that leads to. Domestically, and this is extremely troubling and concerning for so many reasons, especially as someone who spent most of the undergrad work studying Russia, especially the Soviet Empire, and been keeping an eye on Putin for the last 25 years, is former Ambassador John Bolton's home was raided by the FBI on Friday. This is very concerning. It's got Cheka or Gestapo undertones, and they got a flimsy reason saying that it's an investigation because he wrote a book about 5 years ago, which had a lot of cleared information in it that came from classified documents. Trump administration is using that as a reason to be like, oh, he's probably got documents in his house. I don't see this as a proper investigation. I see this more as a shakedown raid. Basically, the administration's telling Bolton to stop criticizing him and toe the line when it comes to Ukraine. And if he continues, then it's going to be, he'll probably get arrested and sent before a judge to try and do a Soviet-style kangaroo trial. But I will say, with it being in Maryland, there's a lot more liberal judges in Maryland because Ambassador Bolton actually lives in Bethesda, which is in Maryland and not in D.C. proper. So I also think it's going to, because of that, if he does get indicted, the case won't even get through motion practice. Any decent judge will take one look at the indictment, see what's going on, and toss it with prejudice, which means if they basically Bolton be walking clear and won't go to trial. And while I was preparing these remarks, and I even got all my thoughts on paper, I was just trying to find the stories so where you can go look at them further. I saw that David Axelrod has come out and said pretty much the exact same thing. So it's good that people are quickly recognizing and get their word out that, oh, hey, this is a sham. Speaking of shams, we'll go now to an update on the Trump Organization civil fraud case in New York State. I will say, first of all, the initial reporting that came out as soon as the documents and the opinion was released by the appellate court first division in New York State, is saying that Trump was absolved of that and there wouldn't be disgorgement, is entirely inaccurate. Fortunately, I'm a fan of Michael Popak with the Legal AF YouTube channel and Substack, and he had a hot take real quick, and he went over the 300 pages in like 15 minutes and explained that the verdict it still stands. Trump Organization was still found liable for all those counts of fraud, and the issue they're running into is not how the trial went and not what the verdict was, but the issue is what's the disgorgement amount because of the excessive fines prohibition in the Constitution. So instead of, it was basically there's three decisions, two justices it was two justices and one justice signed three conflicting opinions. So because of that, so the verdict, it stands. That's not the issue. Trump Organization is still guilty of fraud for cooking books. Now this is going to be getting bumped up to the New York State Court of Appeals, which is their version of the Supreme Court, and they'll be settling the disgorgement issue and see if Trump does still owe $500 million to the state of New York, or if that's going to get knocked down a bit. And also, again, speaking of Trump, something that is finally starting to become more and more of an issue is his health. First of all, I will remind everyone that even though I am terminally online and a historian, I am not a healthcare provider nor a mental health professional. So this is all speculative. But first thing is Trump's so-called weave. It's getting worse. All I can say is that he just rants and rants and rants. He's been his big thing lately is talking about road maintenance in DC, as well as resodding the grass at all the parks in DC and also on the mall. Yes, the grass in the mall does get beat up quite a bit, but that's just because you have millions of people going through there every week. And it's still one of the best places to be in the country to go to. But still highly recommend it. Also, on Tuesday, there was a weird call to Fox and Friends that Trump did. Basically, another long, ranting so-called weave. And what's concerning to a lot of folks, myself included, is that he's starting to worry about his legacy and also asking if he can get into heaven. These aren't the signs, from my experience, of someone who is, quote, mentally coherent. This is a sign of someone who's clearly sundowning. So his mental health, it's definitely getting worse. It's definitely getting worse, and that's not just his mental health is an issue, and clearly needs to be addressed. It's also his handlers are starting to stage President Trump in a way that the press can't see his ankles anymore. So, what's weird about this photo? I know everyone's seen the one where it's from behind the desk. You don't see Trump at all, but you see all the EU leaders. This one is actually taken from the other angle. And what's interesting about this is in the past, foreign leaders are there for meetings, or just meetings with higher officials in general. Generally, the president's sitting in one of those chairs in front of the fireplace. Everyone else is around it. The Resolute desk is really just used mainly for actual signings and any paperwork the president does, and also whenever he has to make phone calls through secured lines to other officials and leaders around the world. So the president sitting behind the Resolute desk during a meeting like this, instead of in his usual chair in front of the fireplace on the other side of the Oval Office, is definitely signs that his handlers are trying to hide as much as they can with President Trump's health issues, and I think it definitely seems to be getting worse, especially with his recent diagnoses of chronic venous insufficiency, or CVI, which means his blood veins in his legs aren't able to get the blood back up to his heart, and is also a sign of a weakening heart. And that's concerning, because that means his body's starting to shut down, but nobody's doing anything about it. Shockingly, even Alex Jones is concerned and stated on Thursday on air that he does not think Trump's going to survive to the midterms. He thinks he's got about a year, maybe a year or less left. Regardless what what Mr. Jones says or what my opinion is, I do think for the president's health, because of his health, and also just to give him a chance to have a peaceful transition and a smooth transition, and not a chaotic one that typically happens in the death of a president, the cabinet needs to invoke the 25th Amendment as soon as possible. Get Trump out of the Oval Office for not just the fact that he's crazy, but also because of his mental health and deteriorating cardiovascular health, and let him just live out his final days down at Mar-a-Lago or Bedminster or federal court. Of course, I do agree with Mr. Jones that Trump doesn't have much time left. He may not end up in federal court, and he may just pass away. But I do invoke the cabinet and Mr. Vance to invoke the 25th Amendment as soon as possible. Just give President Trump a chance to live out his final days in peace. And next, and this is one that's a little more concerning to me, is this week the Trump administration sent a crazy list to the Smithsonian listing all the exhibits that they believe are woke. This is concerning not just as an historian, but also someone who does appreciate what the Smithsonian does in helping to preserve preserve our past and present it to folks in a fantastic way, so that way it's just there. They got some crazy demands. I'm actually getting some of these from whitehouse.gov itself. In an article titled "President Trump is Right About the Smithsonian" was published on Thursday. Let's see, one of the entries is, and I quote, "The National Museum of African American History and Culture debuted a series to educate people on a society that privileges white people and whiteness, defining so-called white dominant culture as ways white people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized over time, and portraying the nuclear family, work ethic, and intellect as white qualities rooted in racism. The campaign featured content from hardcore woke activist Iron X Kendi, info, which that's just crazy. But it's true. It's what happened. White culture had been dominating because of slavery, and that's why there's all these folks, especially older folks, who think that a new traditional, so-called traditional family, nuclear family, husband, wife, 2.3 kids, and a dog is normal, and that's the way everything should be. Another thing is, and I quote, "The American History Museum promptly displays the intersex inclusive progress pride flag at its entrance, which also flown alongside the American flag at multiple Smithsonian campuses," end quote. And here's the thing, the Smithsonian needs to be inclusive, and there's no problem flying that flag. I got that flag on my back of my car. So there's nothing wrong with that. Another crazy thing I saw is, and quote, "The American History Museum's LGBTQ plus history exhibit seeks to understand evolving and overlapping identities such as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, transsexual, transvestite, mahu, homosexual, fluid, invert, earning, third sex, two-sex, gender bender, sapphic, hijara, Brenda Dorfrey, drag queen, king, and many other experiences, and includes articles on LGBTQ plus inclusion in skateboarding and the rise of drag ball culture in the 1920s," end quote. So they're also clearly going after the LGBTQ plus community and trying to recloset them. And one other thing I noticed, and this is because on my old Substack I did write an article about this, quote, "The National Museum of the American Latino characterizes the Texas Revolution as a massive defense of slavery waged by white Anglo-Saxon settlers against anti-slavery Mexicans fighting for freedom, not a Texan war of independence from Mexico," and frames the Mexican-American War as the North American invasion that was unprovoked and motivated by pro-slavery politicians, end quote. Well, I hate to tell the Trump administration, but everything in that statement that they're complaining about it is true. They were trying to explain the early Texan settlers because of the Missouri Compromise. They were trying to just get more territory to expand slavery in, especially in East Texas, which has a very similar agricultural potential like most of South growing cotton at that time, and cotton was a cash crop. So it's all crazy. As the time of recording, there's not yet been a response from the Smithsonian. I do personally view this as the Trump administration trying to backdoor the 1776 Commission report findings into American culture by usurping the Smithsonian and using it that way. Like I said, I love the Smithsonian. I love what they do, and because all the Smithsonian sites are free of charge, as we, the taxpayer, pay for about 2/3 of their annual budget, and it's a strategic way to backdoor some of this stuff. But hopefully, Smithsonian just gives them a big middle finger and does nothing. And finally, and this is, I got mixed feelings about this one. The influential fundamental Christian influencer, radio host, so-called psychologist. He's had his PhD in it, but did a bad job. James Dobson has passed away this past week. He most famously founder of Focus on the Family, and for those of us in the LGBTQ plus community, especially those of us who grew up in more right-wing Christian environment, he's part of the reason why we've been closeted for so long, because we were just, our parents, in good faith, were pretty much told that you can't do that. You can only be a straight cisgendered individual. So I do know there'll be people that mourn for him, but I know that his homophobic, transphobic, white nationalist views are not going to be missed. In full disclosure, I did enjoy Adventures in Odyssey back in the day. Those were fun to listen to on long road trips with me and my siblings. All enjoyed them, and but I can assure you that Dobson was part of the problem why it seems like millennials and younger Gen X folks are leaving the Christian faith is because of Dobson's influence on especially more fundamental Christian churches, and so his influence is not going to be missed. And that's all I want to say on that. And so that's all I have for this week. Thank you for making it through. Please like, subscribe, and share with us if anyone you know would like this. If you're going to comment, please be kind and to everyone, and don't be too mean if you're going to talk about Dr. Dobson or President Trump or anyone like that. You can be sarcastic and have good criticism, just don't be vicious. With that said, I'll be back next Saturday with another video on my series where I read out my master's thesis, and I'll also be back next Sunday to give you an update and my thoughts on what goes on in the news next week. And so until then, I hope you have a good week. Bye-bye.